Clarissa here. Let me get me there. We are. It is Clarissa here. You are back in the limelight. And today we are going live because there are certain times and certain things that warrant going live. Usually I do a record to tape, and very infrequently do I go live. But I know that there's an issue out there that is pressing. There's an issue out there that is demanding a little bit more for us to be speaking about it and reminding you or someone you may know that if you are in an abusive situation, there is a way out, there is help. And I have brought on Amanda Kippert with us today. Amanda is an award-winning freelance journalist. She's a domestic violence advocate and a content editor for the national nonprofit that you and I all know because we are collaborating with domesticshelters.org. That is where 2 million people a year go to seek and find information regarding domestic violence. Amanda, love having you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've been talking about with domestic shelters along the way. We've been talking about the issue of being in quarantine with an abuser and tempers flaring. It's difficult to be in close quarters, difficult to be staying this amount of time in the same space as an abuser. You are an advocate for domestic violence. What would you say to a woman that's listening right now, or someone that might know of someone that is in a difficult situation to do right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that first off, every situation is different, and every survivor knows what is going to keep her or him the safest with an abusive partner. So for a lot of people to hear that someone is currently with an abusive partner, you would say, you need to leave. You need to get out. You're in danger. Obviously, you need to get out. And I think that's the knee-jerk reaction, and it comes from a good place. But for a lot of survivors, it's not a reality. Because the abuser has complete control over them. So whenever I hear about someone who is in that situation, or I hear from a friend who has a coworker or another friend in an abusive situation like that, I always say the best thing you can do is listen and get them to talk, and then listen some more and see where they're at mentally, see where they're at in a safety perspective. Has the abuser threatened their life? Has the abuser threatened their children's lives? Things like that. Those are huge indicators in terms of how much danger she's in, or he. I should make sure to clarify that, survivors can be male or female. Typically they are women, but of course it can be anybody. But just because we're in the middle of a pandemic, as awful as all of this is, and most of us are locked down in quarantine, doesn't mean that it's still not time to do something about being with an abusive partner. If that person is ready to leave, there are services that are able and willing to help them leave. Shelters have not shut down. Hotlines have not shut down. Advocates are still working. They're still there. An abusive partner may try to tell a survivor that these things don't exist anymore, that no one can help him or her, that these people are not available, the shelters are closed. There's all sorts of crazy lies that an abuser can say. And these things aren't true. They're still out there. So even if someone is not ready to leave, it's still okay to just call a hotline if it's safe to do so and talk to somebody and see what your options are. And see if you can safety plan, and get somebody to understand what you're going through. And say, here are some options for you, because the survivor ultimately has to choose what is best for him or her to do at that point.
And strangely enough, a moment of quarantine might just be what was needed in order to really make the decision to get up and go. I always say, get up, move on, and never look back. So, okay. So with that having been said, there's also a common misconception that if things get bad enough, a victim can just get up and leave. And why doesn't she just leave him then? Well, why doesn't she just go? And so, it's not that easy to get up and go. And you were speaking about a plan before, but what say you to those people, or to the victim herself who might be beating herself up because she said, why can't I leave him? Why can't I just get up and go?
There's so much shame, and there's so much blame that is associated with domestic violence that I've learned about from talking to hundreds of survivors. So
Right.
many of them blame themselves. I should leave. I should have left sooner. I should leave now. I should have done more. I should have protected my children better.
Right.
And it's not on him or her, the survivor, to feel like that, because it wasn't their choice to be abused. It was
Right.
the abuser's choice to do the
Right.
abusing. And they're now the ones that are stuck figuring out how to get out of it. For people who say, why doesn't he or she just leave? To me, that's just another form of victim blaming. That's saying, it's on that. Well, like, why is it on them? Like, if you were
Right.
thinking about it from like a kidnapping perspective, if someone was being held hostage by a kidnapper, you would
Right.
say, well, why didn't that person just run out the door?
Yeah, exactly.
You would say, why is that crazy person holding
Right.
them hostage?
Yeah.
So there's so many things that abusers can do to trap a victim, not just threatening their lives, which is the most common one, is to say, if you leave, I will kill you. I will find you. I will kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, if he or she says, okay, I'm going to take that chance, then he or she, the abuser, will say,
Right.
well, I will find your best friend. I will find your mother. I will
Right.
find our children. I will
Right.
kill them. And I
Yeah.
will leave you alive so that you can live through that torture.
Right.
I mean, these threats could hold anybody hostage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if there's not that, then most likely the victim or survivor is dependent on that abuser for survival, because many of them are trapped by financial reasons. They don't have the money to pack a bag, go find a hotel,
Right.
stay there indefinitely,
Yeah.
or find the transportation to get to a relative's house, or buy a new house, rent an apartment. They don't have any money
There are
because the
certainly
abuser
a
has
lot of
made
variables
sure.
there.
Yeah, they've
A
made sure
lot of
that they don't.
variables there. And you know what? It's one step at a time. And if it means your life and it means not wanting to live a life in abuse anymore, it can be done, and it's done every day. So I don't want to ever discourage anyone. The one reason that we are here is to really help people get up, move on, and never look back. The shelters that we're talking about, domesticshelters.org, 2,500, if not more at this point, shelters throughout the United States, and some are sprouting up now in Canada that I know of. Are they spread thin during quarantine? And if so, what is it that we can do to help? What do they need?
Yeah. I think in general, domestic violence shelters are always spread thin. There's always a supreme lack of resources, both financial and from a just a placement standpoint. Most
Right.
shelters have waiting lists that are very, very long of people who are in immediate danger, and they just don't simply have a place for them. So like you said, we would never want to discourage anyone just because the shelters are spread thin, and because it might not be an immediate, there might not be a bed immediately available. It doesn't mean
Right.
that you shouldn't call, because you can still
Yeah.
come up with a safety plan. An advocate can still help
Absolutely.
you figure out, well, where
Sure.
else might you be able to go? Can we help you get there? Can we get you bus passes to get somewhere else?
Yeah.
Can we get you a hotel room for a night while you figure it out?
Get on the
there
phone
are
with an
always
advocate,
options.
right? Get on the phone with an
Always
advocate.
options.
Yeah. There's
And
always,
and the way that people can help, support persons, people who are not with an abusive partner who want to be helpful, is honestly monetarily is the best way to do that, because these shelters need money to stay open. They need money to add beds. They need money to buy food. They need money to staff their hotlines. So you can donate monetarily. And then there's also, through domesticshelters.org, we've come up with a wish list where shelters go on and they make like an Amazon wish list. You can go on and pick specific items that you want to send them. You want to send them some blankets and pillows, and then that goes directly to them, and they would be so appreciative.
Yeah, that is really cool, because you just, it's Amazon, and then you search domestic, you go to domesticshelters.org first, correct? And then from there, the different shelters can then tell you exactly what it is they are in need of. And remember, this is taking in not just a woman, not just a spouse, not just, just not her, but she may have children along as well. Some shelters accept even the animals that I know of. So lots going on there, lots of things that we can be doing to help and to reach out. I think one of the most important things is, when someone is being abused, there, as we talked about before, the shame factor, you just don't want to talk about it. You don't want people to know, because it can be quite embarrassing. If you have a sense, you mother, you sister, you good friend, you whomever, have a sense that something's going on, just ask the question. I'm going to be straight up and say, Are you okay? Is everything okay at home?
Hmm.
What's really going on? I've seen the changes, physically, I've seen the changes mentally, whatever it is. Try to open up a conversation.
Yeah,
Even if you don't get the answer right away because they've shut down, they always know that you are there if whenever they're ready to talk. That
exactly.
they always, right? Am I
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
start creating, if you will, that opening for them, that relationship that, well, she kind of already knows anyway, so I might as well just tell her, kind of thing. I think that just goes a really long way. Um,
Hmm.
so again, everybody, you see, we're talking to Amanda Kippert. On the ticker, you can see domesticshelters.org. Lots of information, all kinds of articles, numbers for shelters, anything you need, it's there. They are there 24/7. I like to say 25/8 because, and this is a shout out to all of the people that are still working at the shelters, the people that
Hmm.
are helping people get to shelters. Huge shout out. Thank you so much for caring the way you do, and making sure that our guys and guys are safe. I wanted to touch upon, if you would, Amanda, you did a lot of research for military spouses. You yourself
Hmm.
say that you're a military spouse, and
Hmm.
so tell the story as to why it was, how that all started for you when you were in the military and you decided that you wanted to go take a deeper dive into what was happening with domestic violence and military spouses.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I'm a military spouse. My husband is military, and I had heard from a lot of other military spouses, none that I knew personally, but had written into domestic shelters, telling us about the lack of support that they were receiving in the military. And since I
Mhm.
hadn't personally experienced this myself, I started to question it, and I started asking around and interviewing dozens of other spouses who had been victims of abuse or were currently victims of abuse by a spouse that
Right.
was serving in the military, and found really shockingly similar stories, which was people in the military were not listening to them. The commanders weren't listening to them. The support people who were supposed to be there to support families weren't listening to them. They were saying
Yeah.
that there wasn't anything they could do. And that when they were getting beat up or yelled at or threatened, or strangled or much, much worse by their military spouses, nothing was coming from this. The U.S. military has its own criminal justice system.
Right.
So calling the civilian police will trigger a call to the military police and the military commander, and they will take charge of that case. So they will decide whether or not a crime has been committed and whether or not to follow up and prosecute that crime.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they decide not to. And what I have found from the research is that in a lot of these cases, how should I put this? The military service, the job that they need to do comes first before a woman's
Right.
safety. Um,
Right.
so I joined forces with a couple of other reporters, and we did a year-long deep dive into this for the Huffington Post. And it came out last December. It was called A Forgotten Crisis. And it talked about all of these challenges that military spouses face when they report domestic violence. So especially right now, it can be exactly the same during the pandemic, where they will find themselves on a base in a remote place that they've never been to before, possibly
Right.
overseas. They have no
Far
support
from home.
system.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
they probably have no outside job because it's very hard to hold a job when you have to move every 3 years.
Sure.
So they don't have that as a support system. And they're essentially trapped where they are. And now they're trapped at home with the abusive
Mhm.
partner. And if the
Right.
military wasn't being supportive of them before, it's unlikely that they're going to be any more supportive of them now. So these women, as any other victim of domestic violence would be, are in extreme danger.
So what recourse do they have?
The best recourse that they have is to work with an advocate, preferably one who, whether they're with the military or not, because there have
Right.
been examples, obviously, of very caring and concerned advocates within the military, but the women that we spoke to specifically did not find that. So I wouldn't want to paint the entire
Right.
military as not being
Okay.
supportive.
Fair.
So you keep asking, you keep talking to advocates until you find the one that will help you.
Mhm.
And I think it's sad, but it is on the victim,
Yeah.
the survivor of domestic violence, to sort of save herself, or himself when it's time to go. You have to be your own advocate in that sense, where you have to say, no, I have to get out. Who can help me? Where can I go? You know, who can be there for me? And so that's why it's important to continue to speak to other survivors, hear their stories, find out who they turn to for help, find out how they got out safely, use the court system to get orders of protection, document everything, just, I mean, everything you can possibly do to build your case and say that this is happening.
Yeah. And what say you to the woman that says, but I love him? You know, I frequently say, you know, if it hurts, it isn't love, first off, but I love him.
Yeah, that's a definite thing. Survivors need to remember too that you can do both. You can feel love for your abuser and still know that you're being abused. And those two things coexist all the time. And especially when abusers come back and apologize and do the romantic things that they once did. I'll never do it again. And I just lost it. And it was one time. And, you know, you can't leave me. I need you. And it'll never, you know, without you, I'm nothing, you know, all these things. And of course, you know, abusers specifically seek out people who are very, very caring. So it is a trait that they look for because they know they can exploit it. So you can feel love for somebody and still say, this isn't safe for me. This isn't safe for my children. And even if I do have sometimes feelings of love for you, I'm not going to allow you to treat me like this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, just a reminder, we're talking to Amanda Kippert, domesticshelters.org, should you or someone you know be in need of getting away from an abuser, an abusive situation, some shelter, someone to talk to. And again, we always revert back to get a plan. There is this very specific plan that you will find out about, that you can learn about. And it is absolutely something that I urge you to do. Again, if you feel like it's happening to someone that you know, or you know for a fact that it's happening to someone you know, keep the portal open. Don't shut the doors. Sometimes you just want to throw your hands up in the air and go, what is she thinking? You know, and the minute you walk away is the minute something horrible may happen. So don't do that. As we said before, but I love him. I offer up, you need to love yourself more than you love him. And again, you need to love yourself more than you love her, depending. Again, we say him because the percentages want to push us in that direction. But obviously this is open to one and open to all. That is a conversation that we want to make sure that, you know, we keep open. It's a very difficult time. These are the wildest of times for sure. Quarantine isn't easy. As I said before, tempers are going to flare. But I do also want to urge, and Amanda, I'm sure you agree with me when I say that it is not only happening to you, but domestic violence happens to everyone around you as well. It happens to your children, and it happens to the dog. It happens to your mother. It happens to your best friend. Anyone else that knows or sees what's going on is affected by it deeply because they love you and they don't want to see you in this situation. So I think we've gotten to the point, and I'd like to know if Amanda has any parting words for our guests, for those who are in need or know again of someone that really needs some help right now.
Absolutely. I would encourage anyone who has any questions about domestic violence, either whether or not you yourself are experiencing it or the person that you know and love is experiencing it, to go to domesticshelters.org. We have over 500 articles that explain domestic violence and all of its nuances. There are a lot of survivors out there who aren't leaving because they don't even realize themselves that they're being abused. They think it's just a bad relationship, or they think, oh man, if I just stop making him so mad, everything will go back to how it was when I first met him. I encourage you to just explore the topic so that you can understand it better. And people who don't know anything about domestic violence, I encourage them to explore it, just to learn more about how society in general is contributing to this issue. And how we can all work together to stop it and save the lives of these survivors, and also end mass shootings, which are intricately tied to domestic violence and toxic masculinity and all these things that are all woven together in one really dangerous tapestry that, we can all play a part in slowing down, stopping.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I think that was beautifully said. I do want to remind everybody that of the social links also for domesticshelters.org. On Facebook, it is Domestic Shelters. On Twitter, it is at Domestic Shelter. YouTube, it is domesticshelters.org. And on Instagram, at Domestic Shelters. Okay, I'd love to have you back on, Amanda. I love the work you're doing. I think it's extraordinary. The more we're talking about it, the more we keep that conversation open, the more we're out, getting the message out there about domesticshelters.org and helping an abused person. I know there are people that don't like to hear the word victim, but helping out the abused. I think that we're doing a great thing. Agreed?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for having me on here to talk about it.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody. Talk soon. Bye-bye now. Okay.